The continent was once terrorized by a necromancer who raised 20 million undead to avenge those lost to a plague. But his reign ended at the hands of the purest knight he had ever encountered, leading to his reincarnation 200 years later, as the descendant of the very hero who killed him. Now, he faces a ruined bloodline and will do anything to restore it, to bring it back to the top, driven by nothing but his own ego. It all begins in a freezing glacial wasteland, amidst the corpses of a bloody war, where a survivor realizes his suffering is about to end. The holy sword of the order has pierced his heart, and the knights celebrate having finally caught the continent's great demon, Archimond, the greatest necromancer of all time. As he faces the end, Archimond begins to reflect on the 10-year war that led to this moment. Despite his strategic defenses, the Imperial Army's assault and elite infiltrators have left him. With a complete defeat, Berkel Rheinland, the leader of the Northern Knights, approaches him and claims he didn't achieve this victory alone. Berkel explains that many sacrificed their blood to hold the front lines so his sword could reach him. He demands Archimond give up for the sake of peace. But Archimond is far from yielding, erupting in fury and telling the knight to shut his mouth. Archimond spits out a venomous curse, accusing the knights of standing by while the plague slaughtered the innocent. To him, these so-called heroes are nothing more than disgusting hypocrites. Driven by pure spite, the necromancer vows to wipe out humanity and begins to unleash his maximum power. A desperate surge of dark magic that terrifies the surrounding knights. Even on the brink of death, he clings to his forbidden arts. While others warn of the danger, Archimond taunts the leader, suggesting his battle is nothing more than personal revenge for his lost hometown. But Berkel stands firm, reminding the monster that 20 million died to the plague and his own undead army, and that the true reason he fights is solely for the sake of the children. The necromancer is stunned by the answer, but before he can speak, his body freezes mid-motion. Archimond can only stare as Berkel speaks of conviction and hope for the next generation. The necromancer's barrier shatters, and he collapses to his knees, staring into the eyes of a pure knight. Defeated, Archimond tells Berkel to finish him, but instead of a killing blow, the knight simply drops his holy sword. Panic rises among the other knights, fearing the leader has recklessly tossed aside his weapon. Berkel ignores them and walks straight toward the monster, who still warns that death will not come easily. But the warning is cut short as Berkel severs the necromancer's head, leaving Archimond to die, staring at a heart so pure. Inside a massive mansion, happy maids gossip about a strange sight. The young master's lips actually moved. Two clueless maids watch in confusion as the young master Klein begins to move his lips. They have no idea that the continent's greatest villain is trapped inside the infant's mind. Klein finds his new body heavy and useless, but as the maids coax him to speak, he prepares to unleash his power. Instead of saying "mommy," he screams a command for his minions to obey, leaving the maids shaking in their boots. 15 years have passed since that catastrophe, and the same maids return, mesmerized by the young master's beauty. They claim Klein is a masterpiece of God, looking more dazzling than ever. But the adoration is shattered when a massive brute, Garrison Berkman, dumps a bucket of ice-cold water over Klein's head to drive away the evil spirit. Garrison Berkman, a priest of the Holy Order, claims the boy's expression briefly mirrored the demon Archimond. He insists that the wicked soul's presence requires constant purification. Klein desperately insists he is not the demon, but the priest sees only the mark of evil in his eyes. Seeing the man as a lunatic, Klein tries to slip away, but Garrison is far too attentive. He immediately orders his goons to seize the boy. For the crime of insolence, Klein is sentenced to a freezing public bath of holy water. He screams that his name is Klein, but no one is listening. Klein never expected his new life to be a nightmare. He is certain his previous life ended, with his head being chopped off, but instead, he woke up in a baby's body, having accidentally screamed a necromancy chant upon his rebirth. Garrison Berkman, the priest who turned his life into a non-stop cycle of misery. For years, he endured endless prayer songs and freezing baths under the guise of holy purification. For 5 years, he has endured freezing baths and grueling prayers, crying for help that never comes. Now, a defeated Klein sits wearing a small party hat, while Aaron, his personal maid, prays for his salvation. Aaron hopes he can live up to his family's heroic legacy and become a healthy member of the family, despite the shadow of his past, but the memory of his suffering still weighs heavily on him. Suddenly, Klein's temper flares, and he throws the party hat to the ground, leaving Aaron, a girl who makes party hats, looking heartbroken as she explains she made it herself. He immediately regrets his outburst, feeling guilty for hurting the girl's feelings, and reaches down to apologize to her. However, his heart stops when Aaron mentions that it was actually Garrison who knitted the hat, which freezes him in pure rage. He grabs the hat, ready to burn it, but Garrison suddenly appears to call him Klein, claiming he was moved by the boy wearing the hat he spent an entire week knitting. Klein destroys the hat in a fit of rage, defying Garrison's claims that the wicked soul of Archimond has surfaced within him. Their bickering is interrupted by Dunkel, the captain of the Red Carriage Knights, who reveals that rumors of Klein being Archimond have persisted for a decade. Surprised by this information, Garrison quickly changes his tune to please the captain. Klein watches with disdain as the priest plays the diplomat, realizing Garrison cares more about status than truth. Garrison prepares to leave, but he leaves behind a chilling warning that another ritual is coming soon. The next purification ritual is set for Friday, requiring Klein to maintain a state of constant purity. Once the priest is gone, Klein is left feeling completely fed up with these exhausting rituals. Klein wonders if Garrison is even a priest, as the man looks more like a muscular demon. Meanwhile, a maid named Erin asks if he is truly not Archimond. He denies the claim, knowing that admitting his true identity would lead to unimaginable torture. He just wants to recover, yet he is trapped in these rituals. He reflects on his life of constant surveillance and the 7 years he spent locked in a monastery. Dunkel, however, notes that Garrison holds the prestigious title of a prosecutor. Erin wonders what a prosecutor is, and Dunkel explains it's a title given to the strongest of the order, signifying a person with overwhelming power.
Erin, full of excitement, cheers that Klein's family is incredibly powerful. Meanwhile, Dunkel agrees, but Erin's curiosity is piqued by a question about their history.
She wants to know who the strongest. Dunkel suggests it might be the current 7th Duke, but Klein insists that the first was the strongest of them all. This unexpected claim catches the captain off guard, and Erin notices that Klein has been staring intently at a painting of the man. While Klein thinks the boy's obsession is a bit much, the weight of the timeline begins to sink in. It has been 200 years since the first Duke founded this family. For Klein, the realization is staggering. He, the great necromancer Archimond, is now technically over 2 centuries old. And that original founder was none other than Berkel, the very man who once led the Knight Order. Reborn as the descendant of the man who slew him, Klein is haunted by the past. The next night, he is plunged into a nightmare about his own death. Reliving the moment, Berkel Rheinland declared he had to kill him for the sake of future generations. Waking up shaken, Klein can only mutter that it was a crappy dream. Klein tries to play off his distress as mere exhaustion, but his relief is cut short when Erin, his maid, crawls out from under his bed. Terrified, he watches as she begins mimicking his nightmare, shouting his former name and commanding a dark legion. He frantically tells her to be quiet, while the priest, Garrison Berkman, begins to doubt his sanity. Before the purification can escalate, the butler arrives to announce the swordsmanship demonstration. Garrison thanks Erin for her report, but his gratitude comes with a heavy price, as he declares that Klein must now undergo double the time in purification rituals. Klein is absolutely livid at the thought of dealing with such a crazy psychopath again. As they head toward the demonstration, Klein learns that the Duke has personally ordered his attendance. Even more concerning, members of the branch families have arrived to witness the event. Erin tries to cheer him up by suggesting he just watch, so Klein offers her a cookie to lift her spirits. The butler scolds her for being cheeky, but Klein only sees how much joy the small treat brings her. Despite the moment of kindness, Klein can't help but view the visiting branch family members as nothing more than annoying worms, and sure enough, their glares are filled with pure disgust. They immediately begin mocking him, taunting him with names like Lord Archimond and asking for stories of his 7 years rotting in the monastery. One even warns the others to be careful, lest he decides to curse them. Klein watches the crowd, noting the distant cousins from the north and west branches who don't even remember their names. They act so bold because the main Rheinland family is crumbling. Turning away from their disrespect, Klein focuses on the arena where a duel is underway. The blue-haired, arrogant Dalton Conwell insults the blonde kid, calling him a bastard and demanding a real fight. Yet the blonde Delane Klein's half-brother and a swordsman prodigy simply apologizes and claims the fight is already over. Dalton erupts in fury and tells him to shut his mouth. Observing from above, Klein realizes the only hope for this family rests on himself and his talented half-brother Delane. In truth, this prestigious household likely only survives through Delane's overwhelming talent. Dalton roars that things will be different this time. Klein tracks every movement with intense focus until something suddenly sparks in his eyes. He realizes this is the first time since his rebirth that he has truly watched a sword fight. Everything moves in slow motion for Klein as he absorbs the footwork, the timing, and the exact flow of mana. He sees the secret of the Rheinland family clearly, the meteor sword technique. With a sudden burst, Delane dodges the strike and sends Dalton's duel to a swift end, leaving the branch family members stunned by his display of strength. This masterful performance serves as a warning that the main bloodline is far from defeated. While Klein struggles to process the vision, Delane approaches him with a knowing smile, having realized his brother was watching the entire fight. Delane teasingly claims he would have fought even harder if he'd known his brother was observing. To Klein, Delane seems perfect in every way, leaving him to wonder if the branch families are only here to bleed the estate for more money. Suddenly, a new presence approaches to congratulate Delane on his mastery. This is Berkel Rheinland, the 7th patriarch and Klein's own father. Alongside the patriarch stands Captain Dunkel, who marvels at Delane's overwhelming precision. Even the proud patriarch insists that a Rheinland knight must remain the best in the empire, reminding the boy to engrave the words of the first duke, Berkel Rheinland, into his very heart. But when Berkel turns to Klein, his gaze turns cold. He examines his second son and sighs, noting that the boy still cannot feel even a single drop of mana. Klein apologizes quickly, knowing the man before him only cares for results and sees him as nothing more than a useless burden. Dunkel attempts to intervene, explaining that Klein's time spent locked in a monastery has made his development complicated. Klein realizes his father. Berkel tries to brush it off, suggesting there are many other paths besides the sword for a son without mana. But the whispers of the Branch family sting more than any insult. They gossip about the family's decline and Klein's uselessness, ignoring the sacrifices made by Berkel to protect them. As the others depart, Dalton Conwell approaches with a sneer, calling the young master a disgrace to the direct bloodline. Klein immediately claps back, mocking Dalton's reputation for seducing girls. When a furious Dalton charges, Klein simply steps aside and trips him, leaving the boy humiliated on the ground. But then Dalton screams a vile insult about Klein's mother. The words trigger a cold fury in Klein. He doesn't care about the mystery of his mother, but he cannot stand the arrogance aimed at the hero's bloodline. Before a real fight can break out, Dunkel arrives to stop the chaos and warn Dalton against his insolence. Dalton storms off, calling Dunkel a guard dog, but he has no idea he just pushed Klein to his limit. Klein looks at the captain's sword and asks if he has a spare, and later that night, Dunkel finds himself deep in the dark forest handing over the blade, but questions why he needs a blade at such an hour. Klein only claims he wants to test something out, bringing up the meteor sword technique. Dunkel steps back, thinking the boy's lack of mana will prevent him from ever mastering the legendary style created by the first duke. Becoming a knight or mastering the legendary meteor sword, a style created by the first duke himself. But deep within Klein's mind, Archimond's memories are far from empty. The battle in the arena is etched perfectly into his consciousness. The timing, the footwork, and the precise flow of mana. He remembers every single detail. Dunkel snaps his head around in shock, wondering where this terrifying energy could possibly be coming from. Even Captain Dunkel stands frozen in awe as the boy flawlessly executes the
meteor sword, delivering a clean strike that cleaves the massive rock right down the middle. He has achieved it, wielding terrifying power without a drop of mana.
Unburdened by mana, stunned, Dunkel rushes over to demand how such a feat was possible, but Klein can only admit he has no idea. The next day, the maid Erin is extremely nervous about the sudden development. Meanwhile, Garrison Berkman wonders if the rumors are true, staring at the impossible feat in disbelief. Amused by the absurdity, the priest jokes that the young master has somehow become a fish. Meanwhile, Garrison Berkman's sense for the supernatural is on high alert. He admits that for some reason he felt a sinister energy emanating from the young master's room today. Klein dismisses the claim as more harassment, but the tension is broken when Dunkel delivers news from the Conwell family. Dalton Conwell has sent an invitation to apologize for their recent clash, but Klein isn't buying the sudden kindness. It's clearly a pretext to lure him out, as the invitation is actually for a prestigious hunting contest. As Dunkel prepares the carriage for the journey, the priest decides to tag along, insisting that the lingering feeling of sinister energy makes his presence necessary. Later, as they travel, Erin sleeps peacefully upon the priest's lap. Klein grumbles about the journey, but Garrison, the priest, simply prepares a pillow for the sleeping girl. He warns that the western forest terrain is rough and difficult for a first trip. The priest is moved by Klein's sudden concern for others, but Klein indignantly snaps that he was actually addressing Erin. Ignoring the priest's teasing, Klein gazes at the landscape, noting how much it has changed. In his past life, this region was a frozen wasteland of snow and corpses. Now, it's a lush testament to the hero Berkel's legacy, having survived 2 centuries of ice to become full of life. After several hours, Dunkel opens the carriage door, announcing their arrival at the Conwell estate, the home of a man Klein deeply dislikes. The Conwell mansion is incredibly luxurious, a display of wealth that seems excessive for a simple hunting contest. As Klein steps inside, Dalton appears, accompanied by several dogs and a sneer. He begins to brag about the mansion's construction, taunting Klein by asking if such luxury was funded by squeezing money from the main family. Dalton mocks Klein's 7 years in a monastery, but Klein only notices how starved the dogs appear. He asks when a hunting contest turned into a tea party. Maintaining a calm facade, Dalton claims he has prepared a special attraction to satisfy Klein's impatience, and then he unleashes the dogs. Dalton explains that they'll scatter food across the mountain to lure starving dogs into a kill zone for the hunt. The goal is to shoot the animals with arrows before they reach the food. He's clearly excited by the prospect of a successful slaughter. Beside them, Erin, the sleepy maid, watches as Dalton approaches her with a mocking grin. He dismisses her worth and tries to lure her away with the promise of a better job, but Klein instantly grabs Dalton tightly. Flustered by the sudden aggression, Dalton demands to know what his problem is, but Klein's grip remains firm and threatening as Dalton lets go, only to call Klein arrogant. Dalton mounts his horse and orders him to follow, leaving the tension hanging in the air. Klein climbs onto another horse. Klein tells Dunkel to stay behind with Erin and warns him not to follow. The knight protests that it is too dangerous to go alone. To prepare for the worst, Klein hands him a magic flare scroll, a single-use paper that can transmit signals even without magical power. Transmit a signal even without magical power. He explains that tearing the paper will trigger an immediate alert. Klein whispers that the priest's presence feels suspicious. He warns Dunkel that if he suddenly vanishes, it means something has gone terribly wrong. After a final instruction to tear the paper, if the priest disappears, Klein rides off into the woods, tracking Dalton's trail through the forest. Klein arrives at the site, only to find dead hunting dogs littering the ground around Dalton. He glares at the man, demanding an explanation for this sudden chaos. But Dalton's response is chilling. The hunt isn't over, because Klein himself is the final prey. Dalton declares his intent to take Klein's head and present it to Delane, proving the Rheinland family is nothing more than a hollow shell. With a signal, mercenaries emerge from the shadows to surround him, all so Dalton can claim the dukedom for his own branch. Dalton sneers, declaring that by tomorrow the world will only remember the Rheinland lineage as a dying clan of northern swordsmen who perished like nothing more than dog food. By pushing his luck this far, Dalton has accidentally awakened the sleeping wrath of Archimond. Klein's laughter is sudden and sadistic, chilling Dalton to the bone as his expression shifts into something unrecognizable. The air grows heavy with a murderous pressure, as Klein calls Dalton a mere insect who doesn't know his place. He declares that the Rheinland name was built upon his own death in a past life, and Dalton's insults have finally crossed the line. As Klein unleashes his true power, the sky bleeds a terrifying red. It isn't magic, but something far worse, demonic energy. As the legends turn to reality, Dalton stands frozen in terror. But Klein's presence is already slipping away, replaced by the command to devour everything in his path. Paralyzed, Dalton screams the name that should be dead, Archimond. Klein only meets his gaze with a dark chuckle, ordering his spirits to leave not a single trace of the living behind. Amidst the carnage, 2 centuries of slumber begin to fade, and as the time passes, Klein starts to remember it all clearly. He feels it, the resonance and vibration of the darkness, and the voices of the dead, calling out to him in a wave of terrifying nostalgia. Back in the present, Dalton screams in disbelief, refusing to accept that Klein could truly be the legendary Archimond. The mercenaries, however, find the idea laughable, dismissively glancing at the dark skeletons standing behind him. They burst into mocking laughter, calling the undead nothing more than worthless skull fragments. Dalton agrees, bragging about the hundreds of skeletons he has already destroyed on his missions. While the mercenaries prepare to claim bones as souvenirs, Dalton orders the front line to push forward and the archers to clear a path. He commands them to fire, sending a deadly volley of arrows toward the boy and his skeletal troop. A hail of arrows rains down on him, yet Klein stands untouched, facing the onslaught with an eerie calm. Dalton sneers, mocking the boy and claiming he'll be turned into mincemeat, but the smirk quickly vanishes from his face. Instead of piercing flesh, the arrows are met by a sudden wall of bone as the skeletons surge forward with shields to protect their master. Klein flashes an arrogant smile, noting that after 200 years, these legendary warriors are still unrecognized by the likes of them. The mercenaries are paralyzed, wondering where these shields came from. As his enemies tremble at these abominations, Klein mentally calls out to his old acquaintance, Berkel, inviting the knight to witness this spectacle before he deactivates the defensive formation and prepares to unleash his true power. The army of darkness charges toward Dalton's position, moving with a terrifying speed that leaves the mercenaries in shock. Dalton desperately tells them not to panic over mere skulls, but he is wrong. It's already too late. Mercenaries are sliced in half in a bloody frenzy, forcing Dalton to scream for a defensive line as Klein's crossbowmen begin to surround them. Panic spreads even further when the mercenaries realize the skeletons have ranged units too, as archers emerge from the trees above. At Klein's signal, a volley of bone arrows is released, ambushed and bleeding. Dalton trembles as the carnage unfolds around him. Realizing these aren't ordinary undead, he orders a desperate retreat into close-quarters combat to avoid total annihilation. Amidst the clashing blades, Dalton manages to slice off a skeleton's head and thinks he has found their weakness, narrowly dodging a counterattack. Confused by his narrow escape, Dalton mutters that these creatures are nothing more than worthless undead before celebrating a successful strike. But his triumph is short-lived. Klein has already warned them that his skeletons are very different from any others. The headless skeleton simply picks up its own skull and snaps it back onto its neck, a terrifying feat that once allowed Archimond to devastate the continent. Dalton watches in absolute shock, as the creature's unnatural vitality proves that spirits summoned by Klein's dark energy are nearly impossible to kill. The surviving mercenaries can only stare in horror as the monsters revive endlessly. Assessing his current limits, Klein offers the terrified survivors a sadistic smile and asks if they can continue, even as Aaron, back at the Conwell mansion, asks a priest if the rumors about the young master are true. The priest confirms the rumors, telling Aaron that the stories of the young master's time at the monastery are quite real. Aaron, a maid, smiles warmly as she describes how kind and sweet the young master used to be. She even admits that she thinks of him as the most warm-hearted person in the whole world. She has no idea that at this very moment, he is committing a massive massacre in the forest. Even after Dalton hacks a skeleton's head off, the creature simply regenerates. Exhausted and furious, Dalton realizes that he cannot stop their regeneration through brute force alone. Desperate, he glares at Klein, realizing the only way to stop the summons is to eliminate the summoner himself. Dalton screams that playtime is over, ordering a desperate strike to end the fight once and for all. But he doesn't realize that Klein has already calculated everything, anticipating every move before it happens. Shocked, Dalton recognizes the stance. It is the secret meteor sword technique used by Delane. In a blink, Klein appears behind him, using the Rheinland family's ultimate skill to strike him down. As Dalton is sliced into pieces, Klein notes that his true judgment is only just beginning. Death is certain for the knight, yet Klein muses on how his connection to the legendary Archimond complicates this fate. Even as he falls, Klein uses the Rheinland family's strength to ensure the enemy's blood flows even thicker. As Dalton dies, Klein tells him he can no longer ignore his new purpose, leaving the knight confused and alone in death. After the carnage, Klein looks toward his ruined family legacy. He will raise the Rheinland name from the shadows once again. But Dalton's consciousness isn't gone. Instead, he finds himself trapped in a void so dark that he can see nothing, feeling as though he is bound to an unseen force. As the darkness begins to shift, a presence approaches the confused soul. Archimond appears, explaining that this is the beyond a realm for souls created by the necromancer himself. The great necromancer then begins to recount Dalton's sins, reminding him of the cruelty he committed in the name of a mere hunt. Dalton snaps that Archimond is talking nonsense, demanding his release before stopping in sudden confusion. He remembers Klein's sword piercing his body, yet here he stands completely unharmed. The realization is terrifying. Archimond reveals the truth. Dalton is already dead, and this realm is merely a place to settle old debts. The boy's frantic denials go ignored. Whether he believes it or not is irrelevant, the necromancer declares. Now, the time has come to pay for his sins. With a flick of his will, Archimond summons the very hunting dogs Dalton once used for sport to consume him alive in a hell of his own making, as Dalton's screams echo through the void, back in the physical world. Dalton's lifeless body begins to weep in agony. Standing over the scene, Klein simply watches. Soon the skeleton army approaches Klein, seeking a final end to their service. He accepts their request, promising to break their curse and grant them peace. As the magic takes hold, the spirits finally find their rest. Staring at the empty remains, Klein wonders how true death works. If bones are scattered, why was he revived in the first place? To what end? But the peace is shattered when a masked stranger approaches, mocking Klein for his unexpected use of necromancy. The stranger has clearly witnessed everything. When Klein demands his identity, the man scoffs, claiming the boy wouldn't even recognize him, and then, the stranger unleashes a forbidden soul return art. Klein watches in shock as the dead mercenaries rise once more, their movements puppeted by a new master. This new necromancer sneers at Dalton's failure, declaring that these corpses will be quite useful for his own purposes. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Aaron tries to lighten the mood by offering Dunkel some hilarious stories about Klein's childhood. Dunkel isn't in the mood for stories, his gaze fixed on the emergency magic flare Klein gave him. He can't help but wonder why the boy was so prepared for disaster. Anxiety gnaws at him as 3 hours pass without word from the forest, leaving him with a terrible gut feeling. Dunkel quickly prepares his horse, ready to rush toward the unknown. Dunkel's resolve breaks, but he is interrupted by a group of knights approaching to intercept him. They demand he stay at his post until the hunt concludes, but the captain glares at them, his voice hardening as he declares his duty as the Rheinland family's protector. He recognizes the Conwell crest on their armor. These are Dalton's men, and their interference feels far too intentional. After terrifying the guards into submission, Dunkel turns to Aaron, realizing the young master has been missing for far too long. The girl's news hits him like a physical blow. The priest has already left, leaving them completely alone. Departed, leaving them entirely alone. The priest's mention of a sinister presence leaves Dunkel spiraling into dread, fearing the worst for Klein. Acting on the boy's previous warning, he tears a magic scroll, desperate to arrive before it's too late. While Dunkel races toward the danger, Klein finds himself cornered, his demonic energy depleted, and his body failing him. The masked necromancer merely laughs, ordering his mercenaries to advance and eliminate the boy once and for all. As the killers march closer, Klein feels a sudden signal in his palm, a sign that the priest is finally approaching. He tells the necromancer he is doomed, but the villain only tilts his head in confusion. The arrival of a divine presence changes everything, as an overwhelming pressure descends from the sky to crush the undead. Garrison Berkman intones a holy chant, granting rest to the dead with a strike that shatters the front line, before turning to Klein to tell him he can finally rest easy. Watching this display in utter shock, the masked necromancer realizes he is staring directly at a sacred relic's power. With Garrison Berkman on the battlefield, the necromancer is completely screwed, for he is one of the 3 human weapons who answer only to the Pope. These elite agents are the Holy Order's most powerful force, capable of wielding the legendary weapons left by the Holy Grail. Among these legends, the one known for his terrifying brute force is now standing before Klein, Garrison Berkman. The undead army charges once more, desperate to kill him, but Garrison's sacred relic shatters their resolve with ease. Garrison Berkman delivers a sermon for the dying, claiming that seeking atonement through a baptism of fire is the only true mercy. As he declares this is judgment, he walks past the undead and crushes their heads with his holy book. The necromancer watches in terror, unable to comprehend the overwhelming power of the Holy Order's agent. Once the army is gone, the 2 lock eyes. Realizing that surviving this encounter is impossible, the necromancer can only mutter in despair. But Garrison isn't finished, grabbing him to prevent any escape. The boy begs for a chance to talk, but the priest is unmoved, claiming the prayer isn't over. Yet, he tells the boy he is fortunate the judgment isn't for him, before granting mercy by exploding the kid's head with his bare hands. All that remains is a single eye bouncing toward Klein. Garrison takes a single step, and his overwhelming presence explodes the surrounding corpses into pieces. The blood-stained priest reaches for Klein's head, claiming he felt a sinister aura and has come to investigate. He offers a chilling smile, noting that the energy he sensed doesn't quite belong to this boy. Klein realizes the priest is far too sharp. One wrong move and he will be executed on the spot. Suddenly, Dunkel arrives to check on him, providing a much-needed distraction from the deadly priest. But the strain of the recent necromancy has finally taken its toll, and Klein collapses to the ground. Dunkel rushes to his side, panicking as he sees the carnage and asks what happened, only for Klein to tell him to stop yelling so loudly. Dunkel asks about Lord Dalton, but Klein simply explains that the man tried to assassinate him. The next day, at a tense family tribunal, Dalton's father erupts in fury. Delkin Conwell of the Conwell family reacts with pure denial, demanding to know how his son could have possibly tried to assassinate a young master. He clings to the idea that Dalton was a loyal member of the Knight Order, claiming the accusation is a baseless, attempted murder. However, the Rhineland Patriarch isn't buying it, noting that Klein has remained consistent despite the intense interrogation. The evidence is mounting, as records show 20 private mercenaries were dispatched from Conwell territory. It's certain Dalton was planning something, and the Count is panicking, realizing his son's treason could ruin him too. He desperately tries to shift the blame by questioning Klein's character, arguing that since Klein has never even wielded a sword, he couldn't have possibly committed such an act. The Count continues his desperate assault, insisting that Klein has no mana and therefore could never kill Dalton. Fearing the truth of his son's betrayal, he pivots to attacking Klein's very bloodline. He brings up the scandalous reputation of Grand Duchess Claire and sneers at the shadow of Archimond that follows the boy everywhere. The Patriarch warns him to watch his words, but the Count is far from finished. He screams that Klein is a talentless fraud who hired assassins to frame his own son. Then, a voice cuts through the chaos. That's enough. Klein has arrived, looking down at the Count with cold contempt for his endless nonsense. Klein explains that Dalton hired mercenaries to kill him, and he only acted in self-defense. But as the Count begins to scream that it's all a lie, Klein strikes with a lethal truth. Is it also a lie that I am Archimond? The accusation leaves the Count speechless, but Klein is far from done. He vows to rebuild the family with his own hands and make every branch family member pay in blood for their betrayal. A sudden knock at the door interrupts his dark oath. A maid enters to announce the arrival of Laya, the commander of the Blue Holy Lance Knights, a woman Klein remembers from the fencing exhibition. Though the meeting is not for the Rhineland family, the Patriarch allows her entry because Dalton once served under her command. As she enters, Klein's gaze meets hers. Laya requests a private word with him, leaving Klein wondering why a knight of her stature would seek him out so suddenly. The patriarch grants permission for a brief conversation. Klein realizes this summons must be one of three things: confirmation, suspicion, or a test. He follows Laya through the mansion. It doesn't matter what her motive is, Klein doesn't run from his goals, and he will use this opportunity to his advantage. Once they are alone in a private room, Laya slams her foot on the table and leans in close, asking if she can touch him. Klein is left stunned by her boldness. Laya is the eldest daughter of one of the continent's three great houses and a formidable commander of the Blue Holy Lance Knights. Laya is a legendary spear master, a woman who once wiped out high-level monsters all by herself. But in the present, her eyes glare at Klein, asking if he isn't coming with her. She tells him not to act familiar, making it clear they aren't actually related. Despite the family ties Dunkel described, they don't share a single drop of blood. Once they are behind closed doors, Laya suddenly slams Klein against the wall for a private moment. Confused by her sudden intensity, Klein can only stare as she asks if she can touch him. She grabs his hand, noting how soft it is without any wounds or blisters, remarking that it feels almost like a baby's hand. She explains that even the best swordsmen have specific hardpoints on their fingers, but Klein's tendons tell a different story. Confused by her scrutiny, Klein asks what any of this has to do with his survival, as her eyes search his hands for any trace of a sword's grip. Laya's interrogation turns sharp, questioning if he possesses some unknown power, prompting an irritated Klein to push her away. The tension peaks as Laya's gaze shifts from his hands to his very identity, looking for a reaction that reveals if he is truly Archimond. Desperate to regain control, Klein fires back a challenge. What if it were true, and he really was the legendary necromancer? Laya's response is a burst of laughter that cuts deeper than any blade. She mocks him, insisting that a mere kid with no presence or respect could never be the great Archimond. The insult leaves Klein reeling, especially when Laya teasingly offers a kiss, if he can prove he actually overcame a knight without training. Before he can process the provocation, Laya turns and walks away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Back at the tribunal, Klein realizes how naive he was. Being the useless second son, locked away for 7 years, means no one will believe his story of self-defense. As they arrive, Klein's father approaches to demand an explanation for the meeting, but before Laya can respond, "Our boy," Klein draws his sword with a sudden motion that leaves the room in shock, then points the blade directly at Delkin Conwell, the man who accused him. He demands a duel through a trial by combat, a move that leaves the Count sputtering in disbelief. In the north, this ancient judgment offers no restrictions on technique. The winner simply takes the final say. Klein is relentless, stating that the Count's attempt to frame him and his insults toward his mother have made a duel inevitable. While Klein knows his true identity as Archimond makes him indifferent to this family's drama, he remains focused on his goal. He demands a swift resolution to this standoff. The crowd begins to whisper, sensing that an old tradition is about to breathe life into the tribunal. Seeing the momentum shift, the patriarch declares that the family must honor this tradition established by their founder. As the 7th Duke of Rheinland, he guarantees the duel's outcome will invalidate all previous evidence, giving the Count a dangerous new opportunity. The Count sneers, betting everything on the fact that Klein possesses no magical power and cannot win this fight alone. But Klein is already moving. The Count's hatred is palpable as he promises to personally destroy Klein, just as he did to his son. The duel is set for 4 days from now, and though many see Klein's outburst as an impulse, he knows this is just the
beginning. He will use the Conwell family as a stepping stone to reform the Rhinelands and prove his worth to every branch family in the north.
Later, in the privacy of his room, Klein faces his older brother Delane, who fears the trial will end in death. But Klein remains unmoved, insisting that with their father's permission, there is no turning back. Delane, visibly shaken, suggests using a champion to fight in Klein's place, but Klein refuses. He knows the branch families only bow to their father, the North's strongest swordsman, and Delane. This fight is the only way to claim true authority. A duel in place of the heir would only give enemies a legal way to kill the legitimate Rhineland bloodline. Delane is stunned, but Klein understands that fighting alone is the only way to truly rebuild their reputation. He won't hand this opportunity to Delane on a silver platter. Overwhelmed by emotion, Delane recalls how Klein looked like an angel when he was first brought home. To Delane, their different mothers don't matter. The Holy Order's separation of them only makes their bond stronger. Desperate to protect him, Delane insists he will fight in Klein's place, but at that exact moment, Dunkel enters with urgent news. Count Conwell has already selected a champion named Randall, an Imperial Knight expelled from the Empire for his heavy crimes. The captain reveals his name. Elsewhere, Randall lives for the thrill of the kill, treating every life like a mere game of pleasure. The depraved Imperial Knight Randall drinks the blood of his victims in a macabre ritual. He mutters a promise to himself. He will finally hear a child's screams once again when he faces the Rhineland heir. Days later, Dunkel approaches Klein with a specialized blade, warning him to be careful because the weapon will shatter upon clashing with a mana-imbued sword. On the day of the duel, Klein arrives at the arena, much to the surprise of the crowd. Delkin Conwell questions if the Patriarch is prepared to face an Imperial Knight with a son who possesses no mana. The Count taunts the Patriarch with more insults, but Klein's search for his opponent is interrupted when a massive figure appears behind him and asks if he is truly Lord Klein. Randall mocks the boy's thin arms, imagining the sound they'll make when his thin arms will make when he snaps them. Instantly, Klein slips away with surprising speed, leaving the spectators wondering if he actually dashed backward. The Count turns to the Patriarch, asking if he actually saw that. The spectators look on with doubt, wondering if the boy can even survive this duel. Even in the arena, Randall mocks him, claiming Klein looks terrified. Klein denies the fear, though he privately admits the priest's overwhelming presence was truly terrifying. Meanwhile, Laya watches the duel from afar, ignoring a knight's warning that her mother will be furious if she stays. The truth is, that woman isn't even her real mother. As she watches, Laya secretly considers a reward for the boy. If Klein beats this knight, she might just give him a kiss. Down in the arena, Klein issues a strange warning about Randall's stiff neck, but the giant ignores him, tapping the boy's shoulder with total contempt. Klein's patience snaps, and he calls the giant a pervert, taunting him with why the Empire abandoned him. Randall prepares to crush him with a blow that would make any man scream in pain, so Klein calmly unbuttons his coat. A massive punch flies forward, but when the giant realizes it, he is only holding Klein's coat. The crowd gasps, thinking the boy was pulverized by the blow, but vaporized by that monstrous strength. Instead, Klein has simply vanished, reappearing instantly at the far edge of the arena. With his sword already drawn, Klein realizes he cannot survive a direct clash. One single hit from Randall's massive body would be his end. Blown to pieces, even the apprentices in the stands realize that while his dodging is impressive, a glancing blow would shatter his bones. While Klein fights for his life, Delane watches with mounting dread. He knows that any sign of weakness could give their enemies a legal excuse to destroy the Rheinland family once and for all. Klein lunges, aiming his strike straight for the giant's neck. Randall is too fast, seizing Klein's sword and tossing him aside like a mere child. He slams the blade into the ground to declare the fight over, but he isn't finished yet. Seeing the strike was blocked, Randall sneers and taunts him, asking why he doesn't just use his necromancy since he is supposedly the great Archimond. In response to the insult, Klein's expression shifts and a terrifying demonic aura erupts from his body. He mutters that the mockery is annoying, even wondering if he should just kill them all right now. The sheer weight of that sudden sinister pressure sends the giant stumbling backward in pure terror. The crowd watches in stunned silence as Randall recoils. Even inside the giant's mind, a primitive instinct screams that something is wrong despite no mana being present. Even Count Delkin is left bewildered, demanding to know why his champion is suddenly acting so timid. Amidst the confusion, Berkel Rheinland watches his son with wide eyes. Klein looks toward his father, reassuring him that he has no intention of using necromancy. Instead, he declares that a true Rheinland proves his worth with the sword alone, a vow that leaves the entire arena in shock. Randall ignores the doubters, banking on his imperial swordsmanship to crush Klein, knowing the boy's lack of mana makes a win impossible. But pushes every sense to its absolute limit, controlling his breath, muscles, and blood flow. The giant charges forward, screaming for the Rheinland heir to die, but Klein dodges at the very last second, his eyes tracing the mana, the capacity, and the exact arc of the incoming blade. Every detail is visible to him, and his clarity only serves to infuriate the brute further. Losing his temper, Randall strikes with monstrous power, sending a cloud of dust and smoke erupting through the arena. As the smoke clears, Randall realizes the boy has vanished again, unable to comprehend how Klein could read such trajectories so quickly. The answer is simple. Klein was right behind him the whole time. He activates the meteor sword, delivering a massive slash across Randall's back, leaving the giant screaming in agony. How did a boy with 0 mana pull off such a feat? High in the stands, the combatants are met with stunned silence as the duel reaches a fever pitch. Even the stoic Laya cannot help herself, finding her face flushing as she watches Klein's masterful movements. Meanwhile, the gravity of the duel weighs heavy on the onlookers as Berkel Rheinland recalls his conversation with the captain from the previous day. Berkel refused to intervene, knowing that saving a boy who seemingly has no chance against an Imperial Knight would only shatter the Rheinland family's remaining prestige. He feels he has no right to stop Klein, now having already failed to protect him when he was branded as Archimond and cast into a monastery. Yet Dunkel remains undeterred by such pessimism, telling the Patriarch that Klein is far stronger than anyone realizes, and will not lose this fight under any circumstances. Returning to the heat of battle, Klein lunges at Randall once more. While most use mana to crush their foes, Rhineland's swordsmanship relies on temperance. The core of the technique is to strike an opening with the bare minimum of mana, allowing for maximum efficiency through the very method Klein uses to wield his family's techniques despite having 0 mana. His technical precision is a direct challenge to Randall's brute force, infuriating the giant. Calling Klein a lowly bastard, Randall unleashes a terrifying mana explosion that shakes the entire arena. Conquel watches, thrilled by the display, believing the knight is about to unleash a secret technique to seal his opponent's movements. Acting like a lion stalking prey, Randall screams that Klein is nothing but a moron who will never see victory. He charges with everything he has, intent on cleaving the boy in two, while a worried Delane yells for Klein to watch out. But Klein blocks the devastating strike, remembering Dunkel's warning to be extremely careful with the sword he requested. Dunkel's warning comes true as the blade shatters against Randall's mana-infused strength. Believing victory is his, the brute Randall laughs, declaring that this is the end for Klein. But the destruction was no accident. It was a meticulous plan. Dodging the strike, Klein lunges at the giant, proclaiming that the weapon meant to hunt him is finally complete. To the crowd, he looks like a mere feather drifting toward a lion. In reality, the lion is nothing more than prey for a giant eagle. With nothing but the broken edge, Klein severs Randall's arm in a single strike. As the Patriarch declares the duel over, an awkward silence consumes the entire arena. Dunkel realizes Klein has executed the Rhineland swordsmanship with perfect precision, using minimal mana to guide his footwork and the sword's trajectory. Even baiting his own blade to shatter just for a point-blank strike is a level of tactical mastery that's hard to believe. It was a flawless victory for Klein, leaving only the echoes of Randall's screams as the medical team rushes in to stem the bleeding. Klein watches them calmly, even asking if they intend to reattach the limb, but the doctor says no, offering only basic magic and a prosthetic instead. Klein's expression remains unchanged, noting that healing magic hasn't improved at all in 2 centuries. Heinkel approaches the boy, questioning if he feels nothing after such a brutal display, especially seeing a severed arm. Right? He might have a point. After all, Klein is no longer the necromancer Archimond. Meanwhile, Delkin Conwell stands in total shock, refusing to accept Randall's defeat. He turns to the Patriarch, demanding to know the cost of the contract. The Patriarch glares firmly at Delkin Conwell, demanding he honor the agreement and meet the winner's demands after the loss of his son and knight. But the defiance is cut short as a freezing, murderous glare from Klein strikes the Count, forcing him to his knees in absolute dread. As Klein steps closer, the trembling Count can only wonder why he feels like his very neck has been sliced. To assert his victory, the boy demands he confess his sins before the Master of the North. He commands Delkin to kneel and beg for mercy, or else he will be crushed by the weight of his regrets for all eternity. Unconsciously, Klein unleashes an evil skill that makes the Count feel a Death Lord looming behind him, ready to drag him into a fate far worse than death. With his teeth chattering in pure terror, the Count can do nothing else. Broken by the assault, the Count confesses to the crowd that he and his son dared to harm Klein. This terror is the result of a soul-disrupting technique used by necromancers, causing the Count to slam his head against the ground in desperate apologies. He even begs forgiveness for insulting the late Grand Duchess Claire as the magic ravages his mind. As the crowd watches in confusion as a noble pillar of the family crumbles, Klein recognizes this chaos as the perfect opening. This is a brilliant start to his plans. While Klein's name echoes through the arena, the peace of the temple is shattered. Garrison Berkman, a man of steel, storms into the hall. He confronts Cardinal Morlock, an old priest, whose calm prayer is a mask for something far more sinister. Garrison demands answers about the recent necromantic attacks, but Morlock remains unsettlingly composed. Approaching him, Garrison addresses the man as Cardinal Morlock, whose keen ears catch the knight's grim tone. By using necromancers to incite mass terror, they intend to force the masses to flock to God in their desperation. This web of deception suggests that the Holy Order's pursuit of purity may be fueled by manufactured fear. Morlock justifies the bloodshed, claiming that a few sacrifices are a small price to pay for the glory of God. Instantly, Garrison grabs the cardinal by the throat. He is revolted that a servant of the Holy Temple would barter souls for political power. Before the stunned cardinal can even scream, Garrison crushes his skull with his bare hands. As the old man dies, a new shadow emerges. A long-haired man mocks Garrison, noting he has killed more clerics than necromancers lately. This is Palamon, the Archbishop of the Holy Order. Garrison eyes him suspiciously, demanding to know if this was an ambush. Palamon denies any trap, claiming he only authorized the operation and has new intel on their target. Garrison lunges at the Archbishop, but Palamon easily dodges the blow. He reveals a cross containing the traces of the necromancer Garrison just killed. Palamon explains that while the Empire researches corpse-raising arts, a far more dangerous power was present at the scene, the original form of necromancy which manipulates souls. The Archbishop confirms there were two necromancers, and he has a terrifying conclusion for Garrison. The true identity of their surveillance target, the second son of the Rheinland family, is actually a necromancer. Meanwhile, on a dark and rainy night, an old miner works peacefully inside a deep mine, unaware of the danger that a gigantic monster is already targeting him, turning his desperate screams into silence. Back at the Duke's mansion, the maid Erin jokes about the chaos. A week has passed since the duel, and while Klein has successfully shocked the Rheinland family and secured a confession, his 15-year-old body simply lacks the stamina to keep up with his goals. When Erin tries to tease him for playing, Klein insists he is busy reading. She thinks it's just a romance novel, but the cover hides a much darker purpose. Hidden within the pages are Klein's secret notes on anatomy and spell formations, all dedicated to mastering the infamous art of necromancy. With his current body, he can only summon 11 skeletons at once. He needs more power if he wants to survive a true war of attrition. There is a massive problem, and it is that priest, Garrison. Since the man is already suspicious, Klein must regain his original power before the priest comes looking for him, all while remaining completely undetected. The opportunity arrives the next day when Berkel Rheinland summons him to discuss reports of the undead appearing in the mines. Klein immediately volunteers, knowing real combat is the perfect way to conduct research. Though Berkel warns him of high casualty rates, Klein guarantees that the mission will be no problem. If these monsters are truly undead, they might be linked to those mercenaries. It's the perfect chance to practice his necromancy in secret, though Klein has no idea what truly awaits him. To ensure his safety, the Duke assigns Captain Dunkel to tag along on the mission. As they head out, the captain attempts to break the ice by complimenting the night sky, but Klein simply hands him a roasted skewer and tells him to eat. When Dunkel awkwardly apologizes for his lack of utility, Klein bluntly reminds him that his only job is to stand there and watch. It turns out the experienced captain is utterly useless at hunting and cooking, leaving him too embarrassed to even look Klein in the eye. Unlike the captain, surviving the wilds is trivial for Klein, who spent a decade running from the Night Order in his past life watching the boy. Dunkel realizes Klein is far from a normal child, having seen his formidable spirit during the trial. The air grows cold as the shadow of Archimond's legacy looms, a demon who once turned millions into the undead. A grim wind sweeps past them, and Klein's sharp refusal to speak of the demon leaves Dunkel visibly unnerved. But the silence is shattered by screams from a nearby village, where a horde of zombies is tearing through the streets. The monsters are no match for the captain and the young master, who quickly coordinates a defense to protect the survivors. Once the threat is neutralized, a grateful villager approaches to ask who their saviors are. Dunkel introduces him as the second young master of the Rheinland family, causing the villager to recoil in shock. Dunkel pushes past the tension to demand how long this horror has been occurring, while Klein stares at the monsters with growing dread. He realizes this is the same reanimation magic used by the necromancer who once attacked him in the forest. The truth is grim. The attacks began 2 months ago, right after the Conwell family restricted access to the mines, leading to a string of disappearances. The truth is far darker than simple accidents. The conversation is violently interrupted when another villager lunges at Klein, demanding to know if he is truly a Rheinland. Dunkel steps in to protect the boy, but the man's fury is uncontrollable. The man screams in desperation, lamenting that the main family ignored their pleas for help for months, only sending outsiders to ask questions. Through his tears, he delivers a devastating blow. The monster Klein just slaughtered was his own father. Amidst the man's agonizing cries, Klein's patience finally snaps. With a chilling glare, Klein demands silence and tells the man he is attacking the wrong target for his rage. As Dunkel attempts to intervene, Klein channels his power to command the innocent spirits who died in suffering, promising to light the lantern that will guide their way. The villagers watch in shock as the undead corpses begin to move once more. Klein vows to uphold the will of the deceased, causing the spirits to levitate toward the sky in a mystical display that leaves everyone breathless. As the boy listens to the silent communication of the dead, Dunkel wonders if he is witnessing soul resonance, an ancient technique used centuries ago to free the souls of the departed. The grieving villager can only stare at his father's spirit, who offers a final peaceful smile. After that final farewell, silence returns to the area as Klein and Dunkel walk alone, heading toward the mine's entrance. As they travel, Dunkel asks what secrets the spirits shared with the young master. Klein brushes it off, claiming the spirits simply wanted to be avenged before they could finally rest. But the mention of revenge causes Dunkel to freeze, as he's plagued by a terrifying thought. He can still see the terrifying expression on Klein's face when he demanded silence regarding that theory. Tension snaps as Dunkel draws his sword and points the blade directly at his master. "Who exactly are you?" he demands, his mind racing back to the boy who returned from the monastery calling himself Archimond. The memory haunts him. The boy possessed a gaze so pitch black, it looked like the void itself. The suspicion began when a series of mysterious deaths occurred in the estate. 7 cats were found dead in rapid succession, sparking dark whispers among the staff. Rumors spread that the boy had a cursed bloodline with a natural affinity for necromancy. Though many feared he was Archimond, Klein remained indifferent to the gossip. Dunkel wanted to believe the boy was too young to be responsible, but his doubts lingered. That doubt only grew one early morning when Dunkel spotted the young master walking alone toward a specific destination. Dunkel follows the boy's unusual path through the early morning mist, driven by a growing sense of unease. They arrive at the family cemetery, where Dunkel watches from behind the shadows of the tombstones, trying to see what the boy is up to. As he approaches, he finds Klein standing over a pile of dead cats, preparing a ritual that the knight finds deeply unsettling. Klein explains that the animals died from an infectious disease, and he is simply cleaning them up to prevent further spread. The captain warns him against touching the corpses with bare hands, but Klein remains calm, insisting that someone has to do this job. The memory fades as the captain faces the boy again, demanding to know who he truly is. Returning to the present, Dunkel's voice cuts through the memory, demanding to know the boy's true identity. Klein deflects the question by asking if Dunkel remembers a saying from Berkel Rheinland. Klein nods, agreeing with the sentiment that the boy's identity is his own to forge. The captain's own rise from commoner to knight was fueled by that very philosophy, yet the tension between them remains thick. Because of this connection, Klein offers a deadly ultimatum. Put the man's loyalty to the test. If he truly believes Klein is the fallen necromancer, then he should kill him right now. Dunkel lowers his sword, stating he isn't convinced yet, but he refuses to mistake the Rheinland heir for a world-destroying demon. Surprised by the compliment, Klein simply thanks the captain for his words. As they venture deeper into the mines, the stench of rot becomes overwhelming, and the dead suddenly begin to rise. Facing a horde of undead, Klein channels his forbidden power, commanding the bones to answer his call, and providing them with the means to slaughter their enemies. Several skeletons materialize, causing Dunkel to turn in shock. At Klein's command, his new soldiers launch a brutal massacre against the zombies. Dunkel watches the agile, terrifying skeletons in disbelief, while Klein casually wonders if their unnatural speed is as strange to others as it is to him. Guided by the clatter of bone, the two venture deeper into the cavern until a sudden noise echoes from the darkness ahead. Dunkel estimates a horde of 40 zombies waits in the shadows, a force that would easily overwhelm them. But Klein isn't deterred. He turns to unleash his necromancy, declaring that he will release the bindings of these creatures. He converts the agonizing souls of the undead into loyal allies, turning his enemies into his own soldiers. With his growing army of skeletons, Klein pushes toward the noise to meet the coming threat. He and Dunkel charge into the fray, leading a vanguard that begins to obliterate the zombies. Under Klein's relentless orders, the skeleton army mows down the horde with terrifying efficiency. The summons fight with a precision that leaves Dunkel in total disbelief. Even though skeletons are considered low-tier undead, these move like a real army, acting under a single commander's will. Once the last zombie is wiped out, the sheer scale of the slaughter leaves Dunkel questioning everything. Klein reminds the captain that from here on, it's just the two of them, and that Dunkel must keep his promise to believe in him. As they push into the deepest parts of the mine, the atmosphere grows increasingly unsettling. Just as Dunkel notes how strange things are becoming, a few drops of blood fall from the darkness onto his face. Klein searches the darkness, calling out to anyone left alive to assure them help has arrived. But the answer isn't a voice, but a sight that leaves him frozen. Dunkel stares in horror at the cave ceiling, where countless bodies are suspended by ropes, serving as grim fuel for reanimation magic. Before they can react to the discovery, a presence looms behind them. As expected, you really do know your stuff. A stranger watches them from the shadows. Pale, a tall woman in peculiar attire explains that necromancy requires a massive supply of high-quality corpses. When Klein demands to know who she is, she smiles with recognition. But her smile turns chilling as she drops a bombshell, greeting him as the legendary demon of the continent, Lord Archimond. She recounts the Archimond incident, when a relentless army of undead nearly destroyed the world until Berkel defeated their master. This tragedy changed magic forever. Since then, the art of necromancy has withered into mere corpse-raising, practiced by second-rate mages like the girl standing before them. She introduces herself as Pale, a necromancer, but her taunts only deepen the mystery of Klein's origins. While Dunkel is shaken by the accusation, he senses a terrifying surge of energy. Klein realizes the sheer amount of mana she's wielding. Dunkel steps forward, fiercely ordering Pale not to insult Klein with the name of that trash, Archimond. But the necromancer only laughs, mocking the Rheinland young master for his irritation. Having sensed the demonic energy earlier, she is certain he is a necromancer, and she finds it pathetic that a necromancer would bother using a sword. Demanding answers about the murdered villagers, Dunkel is met with nothing but disdain. Pale claims that true necromancers do not rely on tools, but command souls and death itself, as dark energy spills from her mouth toward the groaning dead. Pale declares she will show them the true meaning of her craft. A massive arm of human flesh erupts from a black hole, revealing her masterpiece. A hideously powerful cyclops looms over them, leaving Dunkel in absolute shock. As Pale affectionately calls the beast her baby and commands it to turn the two of them to dust, the monster charges with unexpected speed, and although Dunkel tries to push Klein out of the way, Klein pushes the captain aside, instead taking a direct hit that sends him crashing into a wall. Bruised, but far from defeated, he glares at the beast with pure fury. As the monster prepares to stomp him into the dirt, Dunkel leaps in to protect his young master. Klein reacts with impossible precision, slicing the Cyclops' entire leg off and sending it into a scream of agony. Pale simply smiles, mocking his prowess. But Pale's mockery is prophetic. The monster's wound heals instantly, the flesh knitting back together before their very eyes. The creature lunges once more. Driven by guilt for doubting Klein's true nature, Dunkel resolves to throw his life away to protect his young master. He launches a relentless, desperate assault, but every strike is rendered useless by the monster's rapid regeneration. Even the most direct hits fail to draw real blood. In a final daring move, the captain leaps up the Titan's massive body, aiming a killing blow at its head. The Cyclops is too fast, its massive hand lashing out in a violent slap, sending Dunkel flying across the cavern like a broken doll. As Dunkel lies unconscious, Pale's obsession takes hold, and she finds the carnage far more exquisite than she ever imagined. Lost in a manic trance, she believes her experimental necromancy has finally surpassed the legendary limits of the past. She screams that even Archimond himself couldn't have created something so perfect, convincing herself that she has reached a level of talent beyond the great necromancer. The Cyclops lets out a grotesque smile, reaching for the fallen knight to devour him, but Klein steps forward, coldly dissecting the monster's biology. He explains that the core connection and the suture are the keys to its life, acting as the conduit for the magic that fuels its regeneration. "So how do you kill this thing?" Klein asks, mocking the futility of a direct assault. "You have to destroy the core, and where exactly is? The only way to win is to find the core." Pale sneers, claiming the core's constant movement makes it impossible to find. She dismisses Klein, certain her masterpiece will crush him. As the massive Cyclops lunges, Pale orders the final blow, confident her talent remains unmatched. But in this moment of chaos, Klein's past life awakens, bringing back the vivid memories of destroying thousands of these beasts. He remembers every single pathway of their internal anatomy, feeling as certain as if it were yesterday. In a single blurring motion, he slices through the monster's head and strikes the core dead on. Pale can only watch in utter shock. With one measly strike, he destroyed it all. He shattered not just the creature, but Pale's ego and her precious talent. Bewildered, the necromancer can only gasp at the impossible feat. Klein simply stares her down, telling her that if this was her life's work, she should have kept it as a mere hobby next time, because she didn't actually have much talent after all. While some find death a peaceful sleep, for Pale, everything is ruined. She opens her eyes only to find herself in a terrifying, unknown place. In this desolate void, coffins float menacingly above Pale. As she searches for a way out, she is suddenly confronted by a presence from beyond the world, the afterlife. Demanding an explanation, she only receives a terrifying declaration of judgment for her sins. Her panic peaks when the being reveals his name, Archimond. He is the legendary king of necromancers, the historical disaster who once commanded tens of millions of undead. Archimond orders her to step forward, but Pale finds herself moving against her own will. His voice commands her very flesh to obey him. He begins her judgment, condemning her for using innocent people as mere tools for her selfish desires. As she gasps in disbelief, she notices something strange on her hands. A coffin hovering above her begins to open and Pale is pulled into its grasp. She screams in terror, begging for mercy as she is dragged toward the dark void. Her pleas fall on deaf ears. The coffin slams shut, leaving her trapped within the dark. If she truly wishes to die, she can rest easy. With a single decisive strike of his scythe, he shatters the coffin and ends Pale's existence forever. Pale gasps for air as she awakens in the mine, desperately hoping that her death was nothing more than a nightmare. But the reality before her is terrifying. Dunkel lies paralyzed and muttering in disbelief. Shocked to find a severed head nearby, Pale can only stare and scream at the gruesome scene. While Klein simply observes the chaos, Dunkel struggles to process what happened during his blackout, and if the young master really did all that by himself. Pale demands answers to this madness, but Klein simply declares that their real business can finally begin. Klein asks if she is finally coming to her senses, but Pale only responds with a tense, silent glare, realizing her true situation is undeniable. Then the realization hits her as she hears that Klein's voice carries the unmistakable resonance of Archimond. The rumors are true, and the terrifying reality sets in. Klein Rheinland is indeed the Lord Archimond. He silences her immediately, demanding to know the full extent of the necromancers being sent to the north. He offers her a choice: provide the truth and receive a painless death, or refuse and face eternal life. Terror grips her at the thought of eternal life, but he clarifies her fate. She will exist forever in her current state, a severed head, left to endure without even a single tear. After hours of interrogation, Dunkel finishes recording the intelligence. Growing weary of the mind, Klein prepares to leave, even as Pale pleads for mercy, reminding him she followed every command exactly as ordered. With a chilling smile, Klein recalls his promise to kill her. Pale weeps tears of joy at the prospect of death, welcoming her journey to hell as she finally accepts her end. Klein promises that death will bring her relief, but his magic is preparing a much longer, more visceral sentence. As the spell takes hold, Pale feels the horrifying movement of tiny legs cockroaches crawling over her skin. The insects will be her executioners, tasked with consuming her slowly over the next week. Pale screams in sheer mindless panic, begging for a quick end, but Klein simply brushes her suffering aside. The next day, at the Rheinland estate, Duke Berkel Rheinland reads a disturbing report claiming the Empire is releasing necromancers in the north, while the Holy Order turns a blind eye to the escalating chaos. When Berkel questions the report, Klein confirms the grim reality. The Duke summons his butler, Berkman, and orders him to dispatch the Night Order to the locations Klein identified. Berkel orders reinforcements to the border, believing action is better than inaction, and turns back to his son, praising him for his great feat. Klein humbly deflects the praise, attributing his survival to Dunkel, while keeping the truth about the necromancy a secret for now. His father, seeing the weight of the situation, reaches into a drawer to pull out something significant for his son. The Duke presents the crest of a Rhineland knight, officially appointing Klein as an apprentice knight. Berkel admits this title might not be enough for such achievements, but for Klein, it is more than enough. After Klein bows and takes his leave, Berkman remarks on the sheer scale of the battle dozens of undead, a giant and a necromancer all in one place. To the Duke, the butler starts writing a letter to his brother. The message is direct. The genius his brother has been searching for his whole life is finally here, waiting at the Rheinland estate. Walking through the night quarters, Klein reflects on his new status as an apprentice. While the main estate is open to many, these barracks are a strictly confidential military zone. He knows even Garrison Berkman can't enter without permission, and the priest is likely itching to perform a purification ritual on him. He's just happy to be out of the priest's sight. But Klein's focus is on a much bigger goal: restoring the Rheinland family's glory. With his new title, that path seems easier than ever. Suddenly Erin, his maid, appears and hugs him tightly, shouting for Klein. Klein is caught off guard by the force of the hug, wondering if she's simply asking for more cookies. She teases him, insisting she cares about much more than snacks, while Klein points out a crumb on her mouth to break the tension. The light-hearted moment vanishes when Erin delivers a terrifying revelation: Priest Garrison is here right now. Klein freezes, haunted by the memory of Garrison's psychopathic glare. He realizes he's truly in danger because that priest is a complete lunatic. Then, appearing right behind him, Garrison asks if his mission went well, addressing him by his full name. In the past, the estate servants scrambled through the grounds, desperately searching for the young master. Klein watched them from his hiding spot in a tree, knowing Garrison's fury was inevitable after the last time the priest hung him upside down. As the servants finally gave up for the night, Klein slept in the branches, only to be jolted awake by a nightmare of Garrison. The dawn brings no relief, as the boy awakens from a restless sleep to find the world quiet and cold. But as he begins his descent, a terrifying noise echoes through the woods, snapping him back to reality. In the shadows, several aggressive northern grizzly bears emerge, accompanied by their cubs. Without his necromancy, these apex predators would turn him into nothing more than a snack, so he can only wait. Even in this new life as the descendant of his former enemies, Klein finds himself a cursed child constantly on the run. The memory of being hunted by heroes haunts him as the freezing temperature finally drags him back into unconsciousness. When he finally wakes, he is no longer in the forest, but being carried back to the mansion on Garrison's back. Waking up dazed, Klein asks Garrison if he has finally reached hell. The priest merely laughs, explaining he is simply carrying him back to safety after finding him unconscious. Klein mentions the grizzly bears that were circling, but Garrison assures him the beasts have already been. Deal with the boy, furious and feverish, demands to be left to die rather than being carried by a lunatic. He can't understand why Garrison saved him, especially when he thought the priest wanted him dead. The priest pauses, explaining that a star does not create its own darkness, but simply shines where it is. A young life is the same, incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. He offers a chilling reminder of what he actually believes. Klein can't help but feel the irony of such kindness after all the torment he's endured. Yet, the priest's tone remains deadly serious as the warning lingers in the air. If this boy chooses to become the darkness itself, if he is truly the Archimond the world fears, then Garrison will personally execute him. Back in the present, the two face each other once again, and the priest's greeting is met with Klein's cold, distant response. Garrison admits he was away handling matters at the Holy Order. While there, he obtained a fascinating tool, a cross-shaped capsule. Klein recognizes the blood inside as ectoplasm, a spiritual energy used by the Holy Order to detect demonic traces. Garrison explains that he personally dispatched a necromancer near the forest, but there is a problem. The device shows the trace of more than just one necromancer. There were two. Archimond's intuition is screaming a warning, signaling a danger he hasn't felt in lifetimes. Klein realizes that even with the ability to copy techniques, he lacks the combat experience to face a monster like Garrison. Defeating the priest with his current strength feels like a mathematical impossibility. Suddenly, Garrison drops the facade and issues a lethal ultimatum: use necromancy right now or die. If Klein only uses simple soul return arts to move corpses, the Holy Order will simply take him in. The realization hits Klein like a physical blow. He is cornered. Furious, Klein lashes out at the priest, calling him a bastard for the torture of the purification rituals he suffered as a child. But Garrison only laughs, remarking that, future of a young soul. Looking at the priest, Klein realizes this isn't mere malice, but a conviction of justice, a righteousness that truly drives the man. Klein thinks back to his previous life as a loser who died because he lacked that very resolve, but he vows that history will never repeat itself. Determined to take control of his fate, Klein turns to Garrison. If he truly intends to kill him, and if playtime is over, Klein vows to decide his own path and never run again, forcing the brute to finally stop talking and strike. Klein braces for the impact, knowing a single mistake means certain death. As the priest's strike closes in, it is inches from his eyes. Klein narrowly evades the blow, causing a blood capsule to fall to the ground as screaming servants witness the priest attacking their young master. Klein prepares to counterattack while the priest is distracted, but before he can even move, Garrison is already standing over him, disarming him in a flash and holding his blade. The situation is desperate, and Garrison tosses the sword aside, noting how strange it is for a necromancer to rely on a blade. Seeing through the deception, Klein realizes the priest intends to kill him here, demanding he show his true necromancy instead. Instead of fear, a smile plays on Klein's lips as the situation shifts. The priest's next attack misses completely, slamming into the mansion walls and shattering the structure into a massive crater. As the dust settles, Garrison realizes what has just happened. Amidst the screams of onlookers, Garrison Berkman glares at the intruder with growing hostility. Berkel Rheinland, the 7th Duke of the Rheinland family, steps forward to shield Klein and demands an explanation before his sword strikes. Berkel unleashes a murderous aura of his own, while in the background, Klein watches the chaos unfold with quiet amusement. Klein hopes the Duke's presence can buy enough time to summon the Rhineland Knights, but the tension between them is palpable. Berkel demands to know why Garrison is attacking his son, but the priest is unmoved. Garrison accuses Klein of using necromancy, a claim the Duke counters by noting that no law on the continent forbids it, except within the Holy Kingdom. Garrison insists the Duke knows exactly what using such magic means for a young master. Berkel stands firm. Defend his family at any cost. In response, the priest bursts into a lunatic's laughter, swearing before God to show no mercy to the heretic. The tension reaches a breaking point, and even the knights realize that Garrison is far too dangerous to approach, leading to a violent eruption of energy that begins to tear the mansion apart. As the ceiling crumbles, Berkel warns the priest to hold back, but Garrison dismisses it as holy judgment. The two charge with lethal intent, and Berkel's sword energy is effortlessly shattered by the priest's sheer power. Garrison lunges with a devastating strike, forcing Berkel to glance at a terrified Klein before unleashing the family's secret technique. As these two titans prepare to collide, Klein realizes the situation has spiraled far beyond his control. Suddenly, Eren screams and throws herself into the center of the deadly conflict to stop the carnage. Her reckless move leaves everyone stunned, and Dunkel rushes toward her, desperately trying to pull her to safety, shouting for her to get out of the battlefield before something terrible happens. Eren turns to Priest Garrison and shamelessly demands the present he promised her is happening, leaving the onlookers stunned. She even warns him that God punishes liars, while Klein realizes her total lack of situational awareness is almost a talent in itself. Disarmed by her innocence, Garrison finally gives in to the demand. He hands her a package of sweets from a famous bakery near the royal gate, causing Eren's attitude to, and he explains that they lived in a place known as the Archimond cult. Most of his friends didn't even reach adulthood because they lived in the Archimond cult. Klein is paralyzed by the name, wondering if he somehow caused this in his past life. He wonders what kind of nonsense the lunatic is talking about. As the priest's gaze turns distant, Garrison vows to destroy the very name that ruined his life and took his friends, even if he must sacrifice his own life to do it. He tells Eren to enjoy her share before turning his attention back to the tension. Garrison glares at Klein with a chilling warning. Next time, this won't end so easily. Then the priest simply turns and walks away, as if nothing happened, leaving Klein in disbelief, collapsing to the ground from exhaustion and shock. The boy realizes that making a direct enemy out of Garrison is a mistake he can never afford to repeat. The priest's warning carries a heavy weight, marking the start of a deadly hunt where one of them must eventually fall. The sudden appearance of Eren with a cookie nearly makes Klein jump out of his skin. Trying to shake the tension, he offers Eren a treat, telling her to enjoy a cake from the head chef, and watches her run off in excitement. In the wake of such innocence, the previous life and death struggle feels completely meaningless, but the peace is short-lived as Berkel Rheinland approaches, his face grim with the need for a private discussion. Walking beside his father, Klein knows the real battle is just beginning. Berkel cuts straight to the point, demanding to know if his son has indeed learned the dark arts of necromancy. Klein offers a desperate lie, claiming he found the knowledge in his late mother's annex, hoping to deflect suspicion, while arguing that his zero-mana body left him with no choice if he ever hoped to accomplish anything meaningful. Klein reveals his true motive. The Empire is using necromancy to dominate the North, and he intends to use that same power to ensure the Rheinland family's rebirth. With absolute seriousness, he issues an ultimatum. If his father truly believes he isn't the reincarnation of Archimond, then he must use his forbidden power to save the lineage or cast him into oblivion. Berkel recalls how Klein returned to the duchy after 7 years in the reformatory, calling him father without a hint of resentment. Yet Klein realizes his father was a pathetic man who failed to protect his son's future, a fact Berkel has carried in his heart all this time. In truth, the boy was simply relieved to finally be free. Acknowledging his own failures, Berkel admits he has no right to stop him. Instead, the Duke grants Klein the one thing he truly desired, the permission to use necromancy. While Klein secures his dark path, a majestic woman reviews a report in a distant location, deciding that it is finally time to meet him. Laya bows, accepting the command from Grand Duchess Hellion to bring the boy to her. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, a sudden night attack turns into a slaughter. A massive brute is tearing houses apart and killing indiscriminately, and as the terrified guards charge, strikes with such force that a guard's face is deformed, throwing him aside like a rag doll. The lone surviving guard flees in terror, but the giant is already casting a heavy stone that strikes the man's chest with a sickening cratering blow. The monster's eyes gleam with a sadistic excitement. The brute targets a boy and his sister cornered in an alley, preparing to crush them under a massive rock. With a sadistic grin, the monster tells them not to cry before hurling the massive stone to crush them. He expects nothing less than their instant death. Laya suddenly erupts from the shadows, slashing at the back of the monster's neck. She quickly reacts to the falling rock, using a powerful kick to knock it away and save the children. As she directs the children to safety, the monster charges her, but Laya dodges his mid-air strike only to find him looming right behind her, his fists ready to crush her. He laughs, claiming this is her end, even as he praises her strength. Laya uses the shaft of her spear to block the strike, the impact nearly snapping the weapon, as she manages to wound the brute. With a swift movement, she sends the beast flying across the village, where it crashes violently into a house. Despite the pain, the monster laughs, finding excitement in the sting of her strike, unaware that Laya's spear is already whistling through the air directly toward him. The spear sinks deep into the brute's stomach before he can even react, leaving him smiling, even as he faces death under Laya's cold gaze. As guards rush to her side, they report a disturbing pattern of similar attacks this month, all characterized by sudden rage, inhuman strength, and strange bulging veins. The dying monster just laughs, boasting that anyone can achieve a power greater than Archimond is. Laya brutally yanks her weapon from his body, declaring that no trash like him is worthy of even speaking the necromancer's name. Determined to find the source, she vows to investigate and tear this growing evil out by its roots. The mansion is in ruins, with servants working tirelessly to rebuild the shattered walls. They note that while the damage is immense, it's a miracle anyone survived the massive clash between Heinkel and Garrison. They whisper about the little maid, Erin, wondering if it's true she threw herself between the combatants to stop the fighting. As they gossip, Erin walks past them with eerie innocence, leaving the servants to wonder if she's becoming increasingly strange. Meanwhile, in his office, Erin enters without knocking to deliver books to Klein, who watches her from a distance. She looks at him and casually remarks that he looks very handsome today. A week has passed since that violent confrontation, leaving large sections of the estate in need of repair. Klein knows he would have perished if not for Erin's sudden intervention, but the chaos has finally granted him a moment of peace. Dunkel arrives to deliver the promised medical and anatomy manuals, reminding Klein of his past life as Archimond. Back then, he had to plot complex schemes and risk his life just to secure a single torn page from a grimoire. In those days, such knowledge was reserved only for the highest nobility, but now, everything is within his reach. Flipping through the pages, Klein discovers that the old theories are wrong. The connection between mana and blood vessels is nothing like what the books claim. After 2 centuries of his marking the first time he has felt such pure exhilaration since his reincarnation. Driven by euphoria, Klein vows to absorb every scrap of this knowledge, while in the background, Erin and Dunkel watch him, wondering if the boy has finally lost his mind as he glances at one volume about Undying Rheinland. Dunkel approaches, questioning why the young master is collecting so many anatomy books. Klein calls it a spiritual construction formula, and though Dunkel remains confused, the boy asks if the captain remembers the skeletons. By infusing the formula with his demonic energy, Klein manifests a small sand skeleton right before them. Erin, in absolute awe, Klein explains that his necromancy is unique. He first forms a contract with a soul using demonic energy, then utilizes the mana within that soul to manifest a spiritual body. Erin stares at the sand figure in excitement, but Klein warns that most souls are too weak or mindless to manifest anything more complex than a skeleton. While these mana bodies are durable, their internal structure. These mana bodies are simple, capable of following orders like an army, but they lack the power to truly overcome a strong knight. Klein remembers how hard he had to struggle just to trick Dalton in the forest, which leads him to ask a dangerous question. What if the soul isn't ordinary? Dunkel stares in confusion, but Klein's gaze turns intense as he proposes a terrifying possibility. What if the soul belonged to a knight possessing sublime mana? The soul isn't just an ordinary one. Dunkel freezes as Klein asks if a soul with sublime mana could change everything. Klein smiles, dismissing the captain's worries for now, even though he knows such powerful souls are nearly impossible to find. The quiet moment is broken when Berkman arrives with an urgent invitation from Lady Hellion, the head of the Fall Weaver family. Klein wonders if the invitation is about the kiss Lya promised him, but Dunkel is skeptical about why such an important matter skips the Duke. But Garrison Berkman reveals the sender is Lady Hellion, a revelation that catches Klein off guard. Refusing would be improper, and Klein sees this as the perfect opportunity to hunt for the powerful souls he needs. So he decides to accept, finding a new reason to step into the unknown. That night, Klein sneaks out of his room, leaving Erin asleep on the couch. As she mumbles about cookies in her sleep, Klein walks through the dark mansion, his thoughts drifting to Delane. The target is Lundell, the 6th Duke of the Rheinland family and Heinkel's father, a legendary knight who once rivaled the founder Berkel. Though he died young on the battlefield, his spirit remains a vital key to the Rheinland lineage. Klein enters the family mausoleum, searching for the only soul left behind, a spirit still harboring deep regrets. He wonders how Heinkel would react if he knew his son was here, talking to the dead. Apologizing for the disrespect, Klein begins a forbidden ritual to exhumate his ancestor and calls upon the spirit to answer his contract. Klein's demonic energy surges into the tomb, triggering an immediate violent reaction from the darkness within. An imposing presence emerges as a powerful soul approaches, demanding that the intruder reveal himself. Even after being hit by the surge, the spirit's strength is undeniable, leaving Klein to realize the old Duke's reputation was no exaggeration. As they step into the open, Klein contemplates the sheer power of a soul like this, the kind required to create a Death Knight. But the ancestor is livid, unable to believe that his own descendant has been possessed by the Rheinland family's greatest enemy. Because souls perceive essence rather than flesh, Klein's identity as Archimond is laid bare. He tries to reason with the Duke, but how can a man trust the lineage of his greatest enemy? Lundell manifests a massive energy sword and charges, intending to end this perceived desecration with raw power. Klein refuses to back down, promising to prove the legitimacy of his contract, but the ancestor only sees a brat who lacks the right to speak of trust to Lundell. This is a duel of insubordination. The conflict echoes a century of political tension, where the empire has long sought to control the powerful independent houses, like the Rheinland family, using figures like Lady Hellion to exert their influence. Meanwhile, in the office, Dunkel arrives to report that the books are organized, and Klein reveals his plan to move to the Fall Weaver estate in just 3 days. Dunkel is hesitant to let the young master go alone, fearing for his safety. Klein admits the danger is real, but he needs this trip to uncover Lady Hellion's true motives and the power structure of the Branch family. He even contemplates using necromancy to pit her associates against each other. Dunkel is horrified, warning that acting like the enemy would betray everything a knight stands for. Klein snaps back, reminding him of the corruption at the Conwell mansion and how the Rheinland family is being bled dry by greedy relatives, while the true estate falls apart. Klein questions whether honor and faith truly define the path of a knight, only for Dunkel to insist they are the most important things in existence. The words leave Klein thinking of Priest Garrison, before he offers an ironic smile at the idea of being a wicked necromancer. Returning to the mausoleum, Klein stands ready to face his ancestors' wrath. Lundell is already charging with full force, and Klein realizes the first strike will. By reading the ancestors' momentum, the boy manages to parry the strike and force a standoff. Boy, noting his skill is surprising for a necromancer, Klein had already mastered these principles just by watching the duel between Delane and Dalton, and the explosive clash of others. Now, he only needs to master the combination in real combat. However, Lundell warns that Klein is still full of openings, and suddenly advances with an underhanded strike. To the old ghost's surprise, the boy is far more agile than expected, and just as he did in the past, Klein tries to get behind him to subdue the spirit, unleashing a meteor strike. But Lundell, the 6th Duke of the Rheinland family, reacts with uncanny ease, blocking the strike as if it were nothing. As Klein lands on the ground, the ghost admits it was surprising. He never expected the boy to withstand his heavy techniques. Lundell admits that despite having 0 mana, Klein possesses a remarkably useful talent. Klein can only respond with a serious glare. The ghost is actually Lundell Rheinland, the 6th Duke and former strongest knight on the continent, renowned for his legendary swordsmanship. His peerless swordsmanship, the ghost's foul-mouthed taunts regarding Heinkel's lack of intuition, only serve to highlight the absurdity of the situation. The son of the man who raised the infamous Archimond is standing right here. Klein remains unfazed, noting that Heinkel's slowness is quite much like his father's. But the banter ends here, as the Duke warns that he will be going all out. There is no more room for words. The real battle begins now. Klein is stunned by Lundell's combat stance, recognizing a legendary swordsmanship technique that was lost to time due to its complexity. The sword's trajectories scatter into the air like branches. This is the famous Phantom Sword, a secret technique that makes the real blade impossible to track. Klein realizes he cannot rely on sight, so he must predict the movements. He narrowly avoids a horizontal slash from the right, but then is caught off guard by a left-handed strike. He leaps just in time to avoid a vertical blow aimed directly at his head. The boy realizes the first strike was merely a feint, meant to disrupt his rhythm. To survive, he must anticipate the irregular patterns that will follow. He guesses the next attack will come from behind, but the blade reappears from the left, completely defying his calculations. Klein manages to raise his weapon at the last second, but Lundell's physical strength is so brutal that it sends the boy flying across the field, leaving him crumpled on the ground. Realizing the Phantom Sword's true power, Lundell's spiritual body holds enough mana to rival a living elite knight. Lundell warns him that the mana efficiency of northern swordsmanship is unmatched. He boasts that this devilish technique is far beyond even his own son's, meaning that for a necromancer like Klein, breaking the pattern is impossible, yet Klein stands back up with sudden confidence. Though he didn't expect to be pushed to his limit so fast, he is ready to go all out. Essentially, Klein mimics the exact Phantom Sword stance of his ancestor, claiming the style isn't so difficult to learn. Incensed by such audacity, Lundell calls him an arrogant brat, insisting the technique cannot be mastered just by watching. A tense silence falls as they glare at each other. Lundell prepares his strike, while Klein waits for the exact moment on the other. They charge, activating their phantom swords to clash in mid-air. Lundell questions why a necromancer would help the family of his greatest enemy, and why a mere demon of the continent would do such a thing. At those words, Klein hesitates, causing the sword to stop mere inches from his head. The ancestor pulls back, confused by the sudden hesitation, and asks why he interrupted his own strike. Klein confesses he lived his past life as a dark necromancer who found such knightly ideals pathetic, but he met someone who chose to protect the future regardless. He doesn't care for Lundell's judgment. He only wants to live to see the future that Guy mentioned. Moved by the boy's conviction, the ancestor begins to reflect on the deep grudge that turned him into a wandering spirit. He realizes that perhaps the answer to his bitterness lies in the future Klein described. Therefore, he makes his decision and declares that Undying Rheinland will accept the contract, much to Klein's surprise. Klein insists on an equal partnership, refusing the ancestor's suggestion of a simpler, subordinate contract. He refuses to play the villain by enslaving a sacred soul. Even when Lundell asks if Archimond has finally found a conscience, Lundell's expression hardens as he accepts the boy's terms, prepared to bind his very essence to this new path. Klein raises his hand to complete the oath, promising to guide the ancestor spirit through the darkness ahead. With the ritual complete, Lundell declares that he will serve as the boy's sword until their shared desires are met. The magical bond seals the deal, and Lundell's spiritual form is instantly encased in a protective sand body prepared by Klein. As the sand takes shape, the ancestor wonders if the boy is truly ready to handle the consequences of such power. Klein only responds with confidence, taunting the spirit for worrying about a living person's capacity. Now, with the Rheinland bloodline's strength restored, Klein prepares to bring his new Death Knight to meet his aunt.